welcome back, year 2. So for any of you I didn't meet last year, my name's Carrie Palomera. I am now the director of the Center for Physician Wellbeing at MGH, which is a new role. That was not what I did for a living last time I saw you guys, for those of you I met last summer. So what I'd like to just start off with is hear about what the last year coaching was like for you guys. Any major good things that happened, any sticky points, anything that would be helpful to get some advice or guidance on. Anyone want to start with sharing what your experience was like last year?
I had scheduling issues, so
Yeah.
I actually only met with my coachee once, and that was at the beginning. And then we had the second one set up, and then he couldn't do it. And I believe he also had a baby this year, so. But he's a great guy. We straightened all that out, and so we're gonna try to go forward and do it again this year.
I love it.
Yeah. So I mean, it didn't pan out exactly the way that probably either of us would have wanted, but he was well-meaning, and life got in the way.
Right, as it does, right? That is real life. And I think what's important that I'm hearing is like you're still open to it.
Yeah.
You obviously created a warm enough environment that he didn't feel like he couldn't look you in the eye afterward, and that he wants to come back, which is cool.
Unless he's lying to me. But.
And one thing that I started doing this past year, which is a tip from another coach in our program, was I just scheduled all 4 meetings at the beginning of the year, and looked ahead at their schedule of when are you on ambulatory, when are you on elective, and just booked them all, knowing that we'd probably end up moving most of them. And in fact, we did end up moving about 50% of them. But I now have 8 coachees in all the different tracks at MGH. And I actually got all 4 with all of mine. And it was, half the time it was oh, Wednesday, can we do Thursday instead? And there was this little exchange. But it was way different than me trying to email some intern in the ICU being hey, what's your schedule like? We should meet. And then they're I can't open up Outlook, let alone do anything. So that really helped me. So I'm going to stick with that this year.
Okay, no, I'll try that.
How about the rest of you guys?
We had a very good experience. It was very different than the one that my experience the year before. The year before, the first year I did it was very sort of traditional, just standard intern coming in, trying to cope and adapt to moving to Cleveland and becoming an intern. This year, the person I was paired with was somebody who came in through the combined residency/fellowship program, had the other end of the spectrum, very, very specific, well thought out career goals. We actually spent most of the time trying to identify a research mentor that he would plan to work with in the fellowship portion of his training. But I think we really had productive conversations. He did express the fact that he was really appreciative. He was really not high on it at all because he thought it was going to be this very cookie cutter thing. And he said he appreciated we basically tore it up after the first 10 minutes and just sort of went with what he thought was going to find the most helpful, and did help him connect with the fellowship director that he would be working with a couple years down the road and things like that. So it was very much not according to plan and nothing that I anticipated, and completely different than the year before. But I think it was, my impression was that it was very productive and helpful.
Great. And you'll see there's a whole range of what people need. Now, do you feel like you were able to stick to the coaching mindset even though the curriculum got torn up?
So yes, I think so. I tried to ask a lot of open-ended questions, tried to sort of see where he was coming from. When he, once we were able to zero in on the things that he needed, I do research, but not at all in his area.
Yeah.
So it was, again, probably the way it's supposed to be, but it wasn't that I didn't even know really the people that he might be connecting with. So I was just more general advice, general encouragement, he's oh, I sent an email and haven't heard back. I'm yeah, you cannot settle for that. You gotta be a little bit more persistent. And I just sort of offered the threat that like, hey, well, I'm happy to email him if you don't get through. And I think even that was just enough to sort of give him the impetus and enthusiasm to sort of push, and eventually made those connections. And
Yeah.
at this point now he's has found what he's really thinks is going to be a really great lab, and connected with the fellowship director. And so,
That's great. And it sounds like you were really on his side, like, believing in him, and that
oh, yeah.
probably
Well, that
really
was easy.
helped
I mean,
him push
he was
himself.
Really a terrific individual, but yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the role of the coach, right? You got
Yeah.
you're not on the side of your coach either. You really got to reassess what you're doing.
Yes,
right?
yes, I completely agree with you. That's great. All right,
But
awesome.
yeah, no, it was really it was a very positive experience, but again, not very much an unexpected path.
Yeah, and the curriculum is there as a guide. It is not there as a mandate of like, this is what you must talk about, because if you do force it, he probably never would have showed up for the second or third meeting. He would have been like, this is a waste of my
It was
time,
really
and you
like
got to go with that.
Just a completely, it was just not. I mean, the program is well designed for the 95% of them. He just didn't fit into that, and I think had we tried to just do that,
Yeah,
it would have been not very productive and probably left a negative impression. So
that's awesome. Well, good. All right, and how about you guys?
It was like very similar.
Yeah.
I had a student who actually, or he's a resident who actually was a physician in Japan, and had come over here to pursue really specialized training.
Wow.
And he, again, incredibly specific career goals, and I'm a general medicine hospitalist. And I do advanced cardiology, and so he would mention their career goals, and I would have to like gently remind him. I'm like, well, my job is to help you like thrive during residency, and like I can maybe introduce you to some of these people. But I did a lot of networking, like he
Yeah.
wanted to meet or meet research mentors, get introduced to research mentors. So we talked a lot about people that he could contact, and then I ran into him at research day, and he had like free posters. And,
Oh my gosh.
So like, he's a very research-minded person, which is not my forte. So I almost thought we matched well, because it was very obvious to him that I was not going to be the research mentor, but
Right.
to help him in other areas. And I think he enjoyed. I enjoyed him. It was great. We usually tried to go off-site for coffee. if we could.
Perfect.
I think I sometimes had to remind him that I wasn't here to like just talk about work, like we talked about like life and other things, and we still tried to stick to the curriculum, but similarly he didn't. We kind of had to expand off of it just
Yeah.
based on what his goals were. Yeah, I thought it was probably. I didn't get the fourth meeting. I only got 3, but it was still.
I mean, that's 3 more meetings than this guy would have. And if you think about, these 2 guys, they, would be locked in, probably not thinking about much else. And they would be fine. They'd get through residency, he'd get his fellowship, he'd get his like advanced cardiology lab one day. But like at some point, life is gonna get in the way, like you mentioned. And maybe it's during intern year, or maybe it's during fellowship or something. And if they never stop and force themselves to think through some of this stuff a little bit, it could really be, really challenging for them. So I think, even the gentle prodding of like, and if he never gave you anything, it was like, no, I'm not talking to you, then eventually you'd have to be like, okay, fine, this kid's never gonna talk to me about it. But it sounds like he was willing, but he needed almost like that invitation to do it. Well, that sounds great. And one thing I'm gonna teach you guys today is a new version of the coach approach that can be really helpful when you're going off script, particularly when you feel like, I want to give advice, or you're like constantly like trying not to do that. It's a different approach to try to do it, and you'll be able to practice that a little bit today. And then how about Melissa, right?
Melissa. My experience was a lot like Andrew's. My mentee and I met at the beginning of the year and had a nice talk about, everything he was thinking about and looking forward to, but then I had trouble reaching him, and I had emailed him a few times throughout the year, and he didn't email back. And then I touched base with Rhonda, and she's like, well, why don't you, I realized I had his phone number, why don't you text him? So when I texted him, we set up a meeting, but that was going to be like a couple weeks ago. He's in the ICU, and so we've only met once. And my sense in hearing from Rhonda about him is that he's just, doing great, well-adjusted, and that's kind of was my take on him from
Yeah.
like, the very beginning, and like the type of person who might not feel like they need support per se.
Right.
As we kind of embrace this coaching philosophy, like everybody can benefit from some support and some opportunity to take a step back. So he wasn't opposed to meeting again when we started texting with each other, but I think that he's just doing great.
Yeah.
And maybe has some embedded sort of supports in his life outside of, you know, residency. So I think maybe meeting with a coach is more of a, sure, I'll do it. you
Right,
know,
right.
But I don't really perceive the need perhaps. And that's okay. I guess I was getting coaching from Rhonda, like, am I to try to make this person meet with me? Because
Right.
I don't want to be one more thing on their to-do list.
Right.
But, you know, so we'll see if we keep on meeting. I think we probably will, but maybe you'll address that today. Like, what about the person who just thinks that you're kind of like one more
Right.
person they have to kind of check off?
And like one thing that, you know, either you could do or even like Simi and Rhonda could do, looking at the people who perhaps aren't meeting, is just reaching out and saying like, listen, here's a chance to set some goals and have someone help you stay accountable to them. And, you know, even if you just go once or twice a year, it's better than, you know, never doing it at all. So that may be a productive strategy, but you're right. Like you don't want to be another thing on their to-do list. You don't want to that's like so not the coaching philosophy, is like forcing someone to do it. And some people may need either more time to realize, you know, it's something they want to engage in, or maybe he'll use you once a year and that will be your meeting that you get. In which case you I would say just going with like a coach approach and setting some goals and letting him reflect would be a great way to do it. I do wonder if like setting up meetings in advance
That would be good.
might help, and even just reaching out and being like, it was really hard for us to meet this year. One thing I was thinking is let's just put a bunch of dates in the calendar and then see what response you get. And if he's like all in, then
I think.
then you know it was hard to figure out where to put you.
Right.
And if you open that door to him and he's open to it, then great. If he's like, well, let's just book one in a couple of months, then you're like, okay, he's totally kicking this can down the road. And that might be a good idea to then take another one next year. Because I think a lot of times when you only have one experience, then it can feel like yesterday we were talking with some of the third year coaches, and you know, some of them have only had one person for now going into the third year who maybe only met with them once a year, and they're like, this really feels like maybe I'm not the best use of my time. But I think when you get more opportunities, you get more opportunities and more chance to use the skills. You get to experience like the range of what people are going through and how you can be a part of that. So that's something to think about. So all right, so let's dive in. As usual, before we do, I want to make sure to acknowledge the Institute of Coaching who helped us with developing all this curriculum, particularly Dr. Carol Kaufman, and then all of our grant funders, the Macy Foundation, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation, and most recently the Physicians Foundation, and any of you who may have filled out surveys. I don't know who did or didn't, but if you did, thank you. So make sure to acknowledge them, so that otherwise we wouldn't all be sitting here. We've got a lot to go through today. We're going to get to go through all of this. We're going to think about just general, sort of a bit of a refresher and introduction to that coach approach. We're going to review the arc of the second year and the 4 meetings for the second year. The first 2 are distinct from each other, and then the second 2 go together. The beauty of that is that you can mix and match them as you need to. And so if you do get one meeting, you could decide what to do with that one meeting, or if you get 2 or 3. And so we'll go through that. So thinking about the refresher, it sounds like you guys really have embraced the whole idea of like what is coaching. But just to remind us, thinking about you as the coach are that vehicle, that space for them to go from where they are as defined by them to where they want to be as defined by them. And that really recognizing, and I love how you, Frank, how you brought up this, like, if you don't believe in them, what are you doing? And this idea that like you as the coach inherently value them and value what they're bringing to the table, and value the fact, this guy who didn't show up had a lot of stuff going on. And so it's not like he's a jerk, it's just life got busy. And understanding that, people are coming to you doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. And if you're seeing a not best version of themselves, then part of what you can do as a coach is help them figure that out, figure out what's going on. And also thinking about what are their goals and what's motivating them, what are the different challenges that they have and the things things that they're weighing? What are the choices that they want to be making and they feel like they can be making? And so helping them along that journey. And the idea, and it sounds like you guys also are really embracing this, that you're not there to fix them. You're really just you're there to help them along their journey. And a lot of times coaches will walk away and be like, am I helping? I don't really know if I'm helping. And the idea is if they're talking and processing and reflecting and thinking through things or saying things out loud perhaps for the first time that they might have been thinking the whole time, then you're helping. And that really you're not going to fix things for them, but you can help them along their journey. And so it sounds like you guys have really embraced that. And so this idea, this coach approach that I've become much more fan of this past year is really 3 steps that change the tenor of the meetings. And I found like my advice, like it's not like that ticker isn't even going anymore once you commit to this. And so the idea is that there's basically 3 steps to this coach approach. The first is listening, the second is reflecting, and the third is asking questions. And so to break it down, the listening is really listening for them. Listening for what's behind their words, what's behind their choices, their actions, what are their motivations, what are their values, what are these priorities that you're hearing them, what are the strengths, what are the positives, and really listening for all of that, listening to the energy, listening to the music in their voice. And then when you've really done that, what you can do then is reflect that back to them and really just bounce it back so that they can then be, holding on to it again, and that they're constantly in the driver's seat. And that the best conversations involved with you really come from you listening, briefly reflecting, and then listening again. And so often when we listen, we just listen and start talking, and we might reflect, but then we keep talking. And when you reflect and stop and listen again, what happens is you start to peel off some of the layers of what's going on with them. And so, say this guy who wants to be this cardiovascular researcher, he's saying like, oh, I want to work on all these projects, I want to do this thing, and I want to do that. And you say like, it sounds like you're really motivated. I mean, that's exactly what he just said, and that's exactly what's behind his words. It sounds so simple. But if you then stop talking, he can tell you what is motivating him, what is driving him, where's this whole thing going, what is, when he's pushing himself, what is it because he wants to be doing it, is because someone told him he should be doing it, and like that can really come out. And then you reflect again. It sounds like I'm hearing that there are all these different projects that you could be doing, but it sounds like you're really excited about this one. And you think, what's so exciting about that one? What's not might not be exciting about the other ones. But the idea is that you just keep peeling off the layers. And eventually when you've done that a couple of times, you've listened and reflected and listened and reflected, what can happen is you then have like all the tools that you need on the table, everything exposed, so that when you do follow up with your questions, everything they need is right there, and that they've really unpackaged it for themselves. And we'll walk through what are powerful questions. So the first step is really to listen with no agenda, other than to really hear them and really listen for them. And the idea is that there's all different kinds of listening, and we usually get pretty well to this like attentive listening. Hopefully none of you are down here ignoring. And that it's we're really going for that empathic listening, like really listening to understand them and figure them out, like who is this person in front of me? And when you do that, you can help them understand themselves better. And so that's why I say, like, when you're doing that listening, you're really listening for them, not even to them. And that when you reflect back, you're just reflecting back what you're hearing and then letting them keep talking. And the beauty of reflections is they can be simple. They can just be commenting on like, wow, when you talked about that project, like your eyes lit up or your face scrunched up or whatever it may be, your voice changed. Or it can be like, I'm hearing you saying this, but I'm also hearing you saying that. And so with these reflections, they can be pretty simple and straightforward, but the best part is you don't have to be right. A wrong reflection can be just as powerful because they can be like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this. And you're like, oh, okay, well then. And so even the wrong reflections help them to clarify where that discrepancy might be in their own words. And that when you are ready to ask questions, after you've done this reflect and listen thing a few times, the type of questions we ask are very different than the type of questions that make us good doctors. The type of questions that make us good doctors are why questions. You know, why is it like this? Why is your blood pressure like that? Why aren't you taking your medicines? Why are you late to your appointments? Why are you in heart failure? Like, the why questions help us drill down, help us to diagnose, help us to understand things for ourselves. But that when you're working with your coachee, the why questions don't help them, because they know why. They've already done that digging, or they have that experience. And so, you know, if we drill down to the whys with them, it just further tethers them into whatever they're working on right now. And the idea with your questions, the most powerful questions, almost like lift them above whatever it is they're talking about so that they can see it from a different angle. And so the best questions that you can ask are really the what and the how questions. You know, what would it look like if this project were going really well? How might it look if you were to ask for help from somebody? What would the best mentor be for you? What has been the best mentor for you? How might you go about figuring out if this is a good fit for you? And so the what and the how questions really put them in the driver's seat and help them explore things with more of a future orientation and more of a creative brainstorming way, as opposed to just thinking about, you know, what is and isn't working in their current reality. And so even if all that you do in these meetings, if you go off script, is say, I'm going to listen, I'm going to reflect, I'm going to listen, I'm going to reflect, and then I'm going to ask my what and my how questions, then you've done it. And so the idea is that they're doing most of the talking. And so when you hear them say, like, okay, this is something I'm working on, or this is a challenge I'm facing, or a problem I'm sorting through, that's your sign to go through. That's when you jump into, like, your listening, reflecting, and then once all the tools are out and the layers have been exposed, then you can do your what and your how questions and really start to move forward with that. And so this, I found, it's hard to do. And like, I find the first one, I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then I want to, like, ask a question, or I reflect and then I keep talking. And so it takes active work, but as you practice it, it does get a lot easier. And like I said, it becomes liberating. Any questions about this approach?
Yeah, so actually, just to counter what you said, I think this is actually a fantastic approach to take in primary care. I don't know if you agree.
Yes.
But, like, we don't get to understanding why people are behaving the way they do in order to motivate them to change. So when you ask the how, or what would this look like? What have you done in the past that's worked for you? I actually think there's a lot of coaching, at least in primary care.
Totally in primary care.
Yeah. So
I use this all the time. Yeah, and like I found, like, particularly like obesity, you know, like asking well, why don't you just try this, or all my patients do well with this. It's just like, it's never gonna happen. But if I'm like, what would it look like if you could lose 5 pounds? Mm-hmm. How would you get started, or how have you done well before? Yeah. You know, what's been your most successful approach? Yeah, I find I use it all the time now, and it really changes it.
Yeah, it's helped. Sure.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I agree. Okay. So, year 2. So the approach for year 2 is that we want to start off again with a chance to build a new 10 out of 10 for what a perfect year would look like. And we do that using a model called the Janus model, which I'm going to tell you guys about in just a sec. And then we dive into a new exercise that's been added to the curriculum this year, which is the gas tank exercise, which is really thinking like we all have a tank, and there are things that fill and drain our tank, and understanding what control you have over that process can be very powerful. And then we jump into a model called distributed leadership for the second half of the year, which is really, it says leadership, but it's really about how do you work in teams, how are you functioning in teams, how do you read people, emotional intelligence, and a chance for people to process and, like, chew through some of their team experiences, which they often don't have a space to do. You know, it's not like they're gonna sit down with Keith and be like, I really didn't get along with my attending, or my, you know, one of the resource nurse, and it was like this really awkward dialogue. But that's the kind of stuff that if they don't have a space, can really start to eat away at them. And so to give them a productive space to kind of chew through some of that stuff will happen in the 3rd and the 4th meetings. But this is a great example. If you are, say you only get 3 meetings next year, squish this all into one. You know, so you have some flexibility. If you can only get 1 meeting, you can sort of read the room and figure out, do we do some Janus and gas tank, or do we do the distributed leadership stuff? So you can mix and match this, or you can say, I'm just going to be the coach and do the coach approach if it doesn't seem like this is what they need from you at that time. So we'll dive in first to Janus. So has anyone ever heard of Janus before? That, yes. So I'd never heard of Janus. So Janus is a Roman god, and it's the god of two faces, new beginnings, gateways, transitions, doorways. It's actually where the month January is named after, which I feel like, you think New Year's resolutions and everything. And so as they're entering into this new year, where they've had a year under their belt, there's ways that they've changed, there's ways that they've evolved, there's things that they're proud of, there's a lot of growth that happened. And so what you're doing in this first exercise is looking back on the person who showed up here a year ago and who that person was, how that narrative about them of who they are as a professional has evolved, what they're proud of, what they're excited about, and then as they think about looking ahead to the coming year, it segues very nicely into a new 10 out of 10. But first starting with thinking about, what, as you look ahead, what are you most looking forward to? What are you most excited about? And that's where you can bring out some of this, I'm excited to work on this project, I'm excited to apply for fellowship, and you can invite them to say like anything outside of work that you're excited about. And then you can say, all right, now that we've heard all these things, what would your 10 out of 10 look like for this year? So it's a really just casual conversation. It's a nice way to reconnect if it's been a little while, to think about, looking forward to the year ahead. And so basically how the exercise goes is thinking about last year. What do you feel good about? What are you most proud of? What's had the most meaning for you this year? What have you learned about yourself? They probably have learned so much about themselves. It might be as like, I've learned I love small ginger ale from the inpatient floors, and I can live on peanut butter packets when I'm really tired. But it can also be, I learned that I can really trust my gut, or I learned that, I'm really good at this compared to other people, and it took me a whole year to figure out that that's what I brought to the table. And then thinking about what are you really excited to work on this coming year. And that's really all it is. So it's a great chance to practice your listening, practice your reflections, because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, that's great. All right, but what? What's great about it? What did you just hear them say? What's really behind those words? And so really practicing your responses should be those reflections and then letting them keep doing the talking. And so what we're going to do is practice this right now. So I'll have you guys pair up. And what I want you to do is practice this. It's really just like an interview. Tell me about the last year. What are you most proud of? What are the ways that you may have changed or developed? And then looking forward to the year ahead, what are you most excited about? It could be personal, it could be professional, it could be something in between. And
Play ourselves, not
yourself. Yeah, real life. No role playing.
What am I to say?
No. So just thinking about this past year, and where were you this time last year? What were you thinking about? How have you grown? And if we meet again this time next year, what would you be excited to tell your partner about? All right. So practice your listening, practice your reflections, and these how and what questions. All right. So I'll leave this up on the board, and then why don't we say? Let's see what we have for time here. Why don't we say we'll do 4 minutes each?